So if you used to come to the meeting house, or you've been here before, or even if you've watched online, you've been used to listening to Bruxy speak. And Bruxy's fantastic, and today you have me. But I am glad to be doing this morning and to be locally teaching and just have an opportunity to share with you today at the beginning of the new year. This is great. I had considered what I might entitle today, and I wanted to talk about forgiveness. And one of the thoughts I had was, maybe talking about, a new F-bomb for 2019. My wife suggested that wasn't a good idea, so we scrapped that one. And so we're going to really be talking about forgiveness, though, and what that might mean to us as we begin a new year, and as we maybe reset our lives in line with the way that Jesus would have us live, and after his example. And so we want to just consider what that means today. I have a story for you first. There's a man who really loved dogs. Anybody love dogs here? Me too. Well, I love my dog anyway. He was so devoted to these dogs that he would read about them. He studied all about dogs. He gave talks about dogs. He was so into dogs. And one day he decided that he wanted to pour a new sidewalk outside of his home. The old one was getting ratty, and so he poured the cement and he smoothed it out with his trowel. And he looked at his new cement and he thought, wow, that looks so good. Just then, a large dog appears and, of course, walks straight through his fresh cement with his paw prints. While the man mutters a little bit of something under his breath, but goes over with his trowel and smooths out the damage. He goes inside then to get some twine. He decides, at the very least, what I should do is, build a little fence around that. So he gets some stakes and he gets some twine, and while he's inside, he comes back out again, only to discover again that the same dog has walked straight through his fresh cement. So he puts up his fence, he bashes in the little post and puts the twine around and smooths it out again, figures he's managed this, so happily goes inside the house. 5 minutes later, he wants to check it out, so he looks outside the window, and sure enough, there's paw prints again in the cement. Now he's really mad. So he gets out his trowel and he smooths the cement one more time. And he goes back and he decides he's going to watch. So he sits on his front porch and watches. Sure enough, just as he's settled in, the dog reappears and this time walks over to the cement and sits right down in the middle. He goes inside, he grabs his gun, and he shoots the dog. What? You say, and his friend sees him, he says, hang on, why would you do that? I thought you loved dogs. The man said, yeah, I do. I really like dogs. I love them so much, but that's in the abstract. I hate dogs in the concrete. I know, it's a grown-up for the new year. Sorry about that one. It's one of those, jokes that takes a while and then isn't very good at the end. Anyway, some of us might feel exactly that same way about the theme of forgiveness. You've heard it before, you know all about it. This is not something new. There's no huge revelations that I'm going to share this morning about forgiveness. You know all about it. And you might well feel, yeah, I'm pretty committed to that. I know all about what it means to forgive people and to receive forgiveness. And we think about that. And maybe for some of us, though, that is a great idea in the abstract. Maybe it's something, as we consider what forgiveness is, it's something we say, yeah, I know all about that. But then when it comes to doing something about it, when it comes to the concrete, actually asking for and receiving and giving forgiveness, maybe it's a little more tough. Maybe it's more difficult for us in the concrete. One of our core values at the Meeting House is peace. Community, simplicity, peace, and mission. These are our values. And so we say about peace, we're committed to non-violence, to peacemaking, and being agents of reconciliation. Forgiveness, then, is one of the cornerstones of what it means to be both peacemakers and people who look and seek after reconciliation with other people. If we want relationships that are going to last the long haul, then we have to be willing to extend forgiveness to other people. And we have to do sometimes that more difficult part as well, and that is receive forgiveness fully. However, forgiveness is costly. It's not easy to ask for forgiveness, and it's certainly not easy to extend forgiveness to those who might have wronged us. Proverbs 18:19 says, "An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars." I think there may be at least two reasons that we might struggle with forgiveness as human beings. The first is this: forgiveness is just plain not natural. It's why it's so hard to do. It's not a natural impulse. I feel like I want to get my own back. And forgiveness is not fair. It doesn't make sense to me. I want justice. I want to be vindicated for this thing that has come against me. Well, Jesus has a helpful parable, a short story that makes a spiritual point is what a parable is. And he has one about forgiveness that I'd like us to read along with today. You've seen a teaching from Romans on the screen in the quotes. And we're now going to look at another passage of Scripture that can help us just to lean into looking and understanding about what Jesus might say about forgiveness. And so we're going to simply look at this story. It's in Matthew's Gospel. So that's right, the first Gospel that you come to. Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 35. So if you want to turn to that in a Bible, we have Bibles over here if you'd like one. You can look on a Bible app, any of those things. But if you wanted to look it up, it would be great to follow along. Matthew 18, verses 21 to 35. While you're looking for that, we have a new series next week with Brooksy, starting next Sunday, called Honest to God. He's going to be focusing on developing a naked and unashamed relationship with the Creator of the universe as we learn to pray through the Psalms together. So we're looking forward to that as we focus in on a new year and what it means for us to be able to pray in good ways. But right now we will look at Matthew chapter 18, starting at verse 21. Here's the story. Then Peter came to him and asked, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors, who was brought in, who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, so his master ordered that he be sold, along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned, to pay the debt. But the man fell down before his master and begged him, 'Please be patient with me, and I'll pay it all.' Then his master was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little more time. 'Be patient with me, and I'll pay it,' he pleaded. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, 'You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you?' Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart." It's a tough ending, isn't it? So as we look at this passage this morning, we find Peter trying to figure out this unnatural, unwanted thing called forgiveness. You gotta love Peter. He is a full-on kind of guy. And as that kind of guy, he comes right up and says what's on his mind. "Lord, how many times should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? It's an amusing question, right? Here's Peter, the one who needed personal forgiveness on, goodness me, at least 7 times if we read through the stories of Scripture, being concerned about how many times he should forgive someone else. He was trying to discover maybe a mathematical formula, maybe. But when you think about it, maybe we all have barriers that keep us from giving this gift of forgiveness to other people. Maybe we have a threshold that we don't want to cross, a limit we won't go beyond. Maybe we've asked this question at one time or another ourselves. How many times am I going to have to forgive this person? I'm getting tired of it. Why do they keep hurting me that same way over and over and over again? Peter may have been thinking about this. He may have been thinking about a particular person who'd wronged him and that he'd extended to forgiveness to already. But this time, the person did something to hurt him again the next day. Again, Peter forgives him. A couple days later, his friend lies to him. This time, Peter reluctantly forgave him, but now he's getting pretty ticked off. Peter wanted Jesus to help him set a forgiveness limit. Peter wanted to know when it would be okay to say, that's it. You've messed up one too many times. You're done. And if we're honest, maybe we felt that same way too. But before Jesus can answer Peter, Peter responds in his own way. Again, Mr. Bold, by suggesting 7 times would be great. That's not a bad answer. In fact, the rabbis back in Jesus' day said that you had to forgive someone 3 times, and then after that you could retaliate. The 4th time you could go ahead and do whatever you needed to do. In fact, they mistakenly thought that God actually only forgives 3 times. So what does Peter do? Peter doubles that, adds an extra one for good measure. I think he thought his answer would pretty much impress Jesus. Perfect number. How about 7? Well, to be honest, forgiving someone 7 times is pretty commendable, isn't it? Most of us will get kind of frustrated if we have to forgive someone maybe 2 or 3 times. By human standards, what Peter says was admirable and perhaps even extravagant. But Peter wanted a number. He wanted a limit, a place that he could say, that's it, I'm done. And as Jesus often does, his answer to Peter was kind of unexpected and a little bit disarming. Take a look at verse 22. He just says, no, not 7 times, but 77. The crash we hear is Peter's jaw hitting the ground. He can't believe his ears. 77 times? Okay, so who's got the number? Who's done the math already? Anybody? Someone has. Someone's sitting here and going 77 times. What is it? What is it? Thank you. 490. Just so you're not distracted by the math. You can thank him later. Now, Jesus isn't suggesting that we count the number of times, is he? That we forgive someone. Okay, so 298, 299, 300. Okay, I've only got 190 to go. No, not at all. What he means is there's no limit to the number of times that we're fit to forgive others, people. Actually, if we were to count, think about it. By the time that you reached 490 times, you'd pretty much be in the habit of continually forgiving in an unlimited kind of way. You'd get used to it. It would become normal. That's precisely the point that Jesus is making. We don't keep score when it comes to forgiveness. Since the truth of forgiveness without limits is kind of hard to grasp still, Jesus tells a story to help illustrate what he means. In the first half of the story, Jesus deals with those of us who need forgiveness. Here he gives us some practical help for those times when we've wronged someone and need their forgiveness. In the second half, he targets those who need to forgive others. And we'll find some practical help when it comes to those who might have wronged us when they're in need of our forgiveness. So let's have a look. Verse 22 to 23, he says this. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven, okay, this magical space that Jesus is talking about so often, the kingdom of heaven. We're not waiting for the kingdom of heaven of sometime in the future. This is a here and now for those of us who are following Jesus. The kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. Here's the picture. The king in the land decides to call in his debts. He sent out his collection agents, and they come back with this man by the scruff of the neck who owed the king maybe the most money. Certainly a considerable chunk of change. We're not sure, we don't get told how he built up this debt, but it's clear that he would never ever be able to repay what he owes the king. And since he can't repay, Verse 25 says that the master decided to sell him and his family in payment. It's a bit extreme by our standards, but maybe common in that day. And so the king knew he could never recoup his losses, and he wanted to simply get back what he could. At this point, the servant did what most of us would have done. He falls on his knees. Be patient with me, and I'll pay back as much as I can. Even though he knew he couldn't pay it back, he's desperate. He can't stand the thought of his family being sold because of the debt that he's run up. The king, kind, compassionate man, is moved. The Bible says that he's filled with pity, or in some translations with compassion. And he does something even more than the man asks for. The king not only releases him, but he also forgives his debt. Great personal cost to the king. He wipes the slate clean, he erases the books, and he cancels all the debt that this man owes. Now this man owes him absolutely nothing. Jesus tells the story, I think, because that's exactly what forgiveness is all about. To forgive is literally to cancel debt. When we've wronged someone and they choose to forgive us, they're in essence saying, the slate is clean. You don't owe me anything anymore. The power that I might have over you I release, and you do not have to pay back. Now, the servant doesn't deserve this forgiveness. It's simply an act of grace and mercy on the part of the king. And maybe some of us are living in that space this morning. Perhaps we've done something to somebody and we've actually never asked for forgiveness. We've never tried to make it right. Maybe we know that we've offended someone. Goodness, we've all been with family for Christmas, right? Maybe we've offended someone. Maybe we know we've done something wrong. But we haven't owned up for it. We haven't tried to make it right. We haven't tried to reconcile. And so we sit with this looming and hanging space. Maybe this is the week. Maybe at the start of the year, we can face this. Maybe we can own up. Maybe we can grab that courage, follow Jesus, and ask for release from this wrong. Now let's switch gears, because now we start thinking about those times when we need to forgive others. And so we go back to the story as this man is humbled and he walks away with this wonderful gift of forgiveness. He runs into a friend who also owes him some money. It's only a bit of money in comparison to the millions that he owes the king. But instead of canceling his friend's debt, instead of behaving like the king, verse 28 says that he grabs him and begins choking him and demanding immediate payment. Jesus continues by telling us that the forgiven man's friend falls to his knees in the same way and asks for forgiveness. It's an almost identical plea to the one that this man had just made to the king. Be patient with me, and I'll pay it back. And then there's the difference. Instead of forgiving the wrong out of gratitude for having been forgiven, verse 30 says he had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full, because he couldn't wait. We're a lot like this man when we don't forgive. We enjoy putting people in prison when they've wronged us. We want them to suffer, and we want them to hurt as bad as we hurt. Now, it's not physical prison, like in the story, but maybe there are different kinds of prison that we put people into. Maybe the silent treatment can be like a prison. Maybe we simply avoid them and imprison the space between us. Or maybe the prison is one of verbal assaults and name-calling. Either way, we imprison them and ourselves, and we hold them hostage until we get what we want. Maybe we try to make them feel miserable. I wonder if any of us sitting here today are determined to punish someone, a family or friend, for something they may have done towards us. And in some way, we're just imprisoning and holding them there. Back to the story. This man makes a critical mistake. He throws his friend in prison in broad daylight. And so someone sees it happen and reports it to the king. Word gets around, and soon everyone is talking about it. It wasn't the fact that this man would not forgive his friend that shocks them most. It's the fact that having been forgiven, he won't show mercy. The king is really ticked off. He sends his soldiers and brings the man straight before him. The king reams out the servant for not being merciful to his fellow servant and sends him to prison. And listen to this, to be tortured while his debt is being paid off. Now we notice, don't we, that the debt that has been forgiven before is now back in play, and he has to pay it off and be tortured in the meantime. Let me say this pretty strongly this morning. What happened to that man will happen to each one of us if we don't learn to forgive. The torturers come and take us away when we don't extend forgiveness to those who have wronged us. Maybe they're not physical torturers, but maybe they're more hidden torturers in our day and age, torturers of anger and the torture of bitterness that eat away inside of us, the torturers of frustration and malice that can give ulcers and high blood pressure and migraine headaches and lower back pain and all of these things that can be a part of our world when we hold on to those grudges. The hidden torturers that make us lie awake at night, stewing over every wrong that someone's done to us. The torturers of an unforgiving heart that can stalk us day and night, don't leave our side but walk alongside of us and suck the joy out of life, simply because we won't forgive. And in doing so, in many ways we torture ourselves. Okay, so that's a little bit heavy. Let me lighten it up for a minute. Did you hear about the man? All jokes start like this. Did you hear about two men, in fact, who are in a nursing home, and they've been quarreling for years? On his deathbed, the one man leans over to his friend. He says, "John, I want to forgive you for what I've said, for what you've said and what you've done against me over all these years, and I want you to do the same for me." The other old man, with tears in his eyes, looks back and says, "Yeah, I want that too." The first man looks to his friend and says, "John, if I get better, this doesn't count." Because it's got to be real, right? Author Lewis Smead says this: "When I genuinely forgive, I set a prisoner free. And then I discover that the prisoner I set free was me." To forgive is a process of giving up. That means exactly what the word forgiveness means. It means to give to someone by releasing them from debt. It carries the idea of releasing and freeing ourselves as well. It's like saying, you did something that really hurt me, but I care enough about you to meet face to face, and now I release you from all obligation to ever pay me back. I forgive you properly. And when we cancel debt, we give up demands for perfect behavior, we give up demands for justice, we give up our demands for retribution. And when we extend this kind of forgiveness, we begin to experience the truth that all of us are fallible human beings who are going to mess up, and in need all the time of being forgiven, and in desperate need of the grace of others, and in desperate need of the grace of God. We're a lot like the unforgiving man in the story that Jesus told. Sometimes we stand before a holy God and our sins pile up. You know, those things that we just do, that are a part of us. And they pile up maybe like a 25 million debt that we can never repay, and yet out of compassion for this moral predicament that we find ourselves in as human beings, and simply motivated by his own grace, God sends his son Jesus to pay off all spiritual debt. Colossians 3:13 says, "Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." We can tolerate those who irritate us and forgive our friends and family members when they wrong us, precisely because Jesus has forgiven us. Since those of us who have received Jesus' truth for ourselves have been forgiven so much, then out of gratitude, like this servant, we should practice unlimited forgiveness in our relationships. If we want to be like Jesus. Where are we today? Where do we find ourselves at the beginning of this new year? Do we need to ask someone for forgiveness? As I'm speaking this morning, does that person come to mind that you've not asked, that you've not explored with, that you've not gone to, that you've not made right with? A family friend or a family member who you've wronged? If so, maybe today ask God to walk alongside you and to support you as you go and determine to face them, to own up for the wrong and to ask for forgiveness. Maybe you need to be the one who offers the gift of forgiveness to someone else. You're tired of living with this unforgiving spirit? Are the grudges that you hold structuring actually what life looks like? If so, cancel that debt. Restore that relationship. Make things new as someone who forgives. Maybe you've been tracking with us for a while at Meeting House. Maybe somebody brought you along today and this is brand new. And you haven't even really considered that God might want to forgive you. Or even that you have anything that might need forgiving. If so, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to have that conversation about maybe what it might look like to receive the forgiveness that God has for us, simply for something that we may not have even noticed yet. We can walk together through that space, or even better, you can go to a home church, which is a group of people who are just simply trying to live this life as forgiven people, and walk alongside others who are learning what this means and are processing that in their own journey. In the meantime, let me close by suggesting that the thing I think we all have in common is a Creator who loves us, who wants to be reconciled to us in relationship, and that He's gone and done that. He sent His Son, Jesus, into this world in our place to pay off the debt that we owe. And as we accept that gift, we're free. We're free, as in the story, to turn and offer that freedom and that gift of forgiveness to other people. So together, could we start a new year? Could we mark it with cancelling debts that we have with others by offering forgiveness? And having received forgiveness, we freely offer it to other people. Can I pray with us? Lord Jesus, thank you for all that you have done for us. Thank you that you are a God who knows us so deeply. Lord, that even when we may not know what we've done to wrong you and to wrong others, Lord, when our eyes are blind, Lord, you can help us see. You can walk alongside us and help us to notice those things which we can do to make things right. And that, Lord, you have done it first. You have forgiven us. You have reached out to make all things new and all things right with us, even though it's us that's made the mistake. And so, Lord, I pray that we would be people, and like this servant, and like this person in this story, Lord, who that we would turn, that we would choose to forgive, that we would pluck up that courage, that we would seek you out to walk with us and journey with other people, maybe, Lord, to seek out, Lord, those that we need to forgive. And, Lord, that we would reach out and ask for forgiveness when we need to. And, Lord, in doing so, that we would be people who would show others around us and those that we love the grace that Jesus has shown to us. I pray this in your name.